This video was made possible by our lovely patrons. When you play a lot of video games, like I do, you will inevitably start noticing certain patterns in their presentation, how genres will quickly establish visual shorthands for their mechanics, which are then repeated so much that they will become normalized, and you never really question them. This is how the otherwise unassuming Pokemon Snap can seem a bit radical by making a shooting game where you use a camera instead of a gun, or why the mixing of rhythm and action in Crypt of the Necrodancer feels so refreshingly unique. Not to mention how a game like Typing of the Dead spices up keyboard education by taking it humorously dead serious. This bold, outside-of-the-box thinking isn't all too common on a whole, so it's no wonder that the Capcom-produced One Piece Mansion would delight us so much. Released for the PlayStation in 2001, this is an unconventional strategy game centered around an exaggerated portrayal of apartment living. It's every bit as quirky, chaotic, and intriguing as it seems, making it one of many sparkling gems in the PlayStation's vast library of immortal classics and unusual curiosities. On that note, I suppose the peculiar title also means it's the best One Piece game by sheer accident. Sorry, Strat Pirates, we don't make the rules. One Piece Mansion sees you in the role of Popo, the vaguely teenaged caretaker of an apartment complex. The titular One Piece Mansion, in fact. As Popo, it is your task to maintain these caretaking operations as long as possible, by housing tenants, building elevators, and swapping around rooms. Each month rent is paid and your funds increase, creating a SimCity-esque balancing act of tactically spending money and waiting for the next paycheck. However, unlike its Will Wright-penned ancestor, One Piece Mansion's flavor of residency simulation is a lot more real-time strategy than slow pondering, as your tenants constantly exert immediate effects on one another. Signified by green and red arrows, each inhabitant will become good or bad influences on their next-door neighbors, affecting the other's stress meters. Their health bars, if you will. Keeping those stress meters at bay is important, since these are the people that fund you. So when unwanted intruders barge in, you must not just enter the security mode to bust them in the act, but also cleverly use your tenants' bad qualities to drive the intruders out and heal those wounded in the crossfire. In this way, your tenants become pieces on a chessboard for you to shuffle around and strategically employ to defeat enemies, making One Piece Mansion more similar to a tactical war game than the builder simulation it may first appear to be. This form of apartment skirmish is in turn expressed through two different game modes. A rudimentary story mode where you work towards certain goals, and a puristically scaled down endless mode. These two modes may not seem like much, they're admittedly less options than other games of its ilk, but I think they do more than enough to express everything One Piece Mansion is about. In the story mode, Popo gets berated by his sister Putika for always being busy and never making time to play with her. No sooner can Popo consider righting this ill before Putika is kidnapped by Shokopape, the caretaker of another apartment complex who's jealous of Popo. Shokopape menacingly gives Popo a list of missions to accomplish if he's to ever see his sister again, which is what the player is then preoccupied with while playing. After about an hour of playtime, Popo will overcome Shokopape's challenges and free Putika, who's now sherry after having assumed the role of final boss for no other reason than boredom. In response, Popo realizes his neglect, and they go to an amusement park together. The end. Oh, and also spoilers for One Piece Mansion, I guess. This tale is evidently little more than setup for the game's action, a premise to contextualize what's going on. Popo isn't exactly overflowing with pathos. He's just some little dude you control who needs a superficial reason for why he does what he does. The text is sparse and inconsequential, enough to make you forget it's even there. Probably by design. This barren working material in turn results in us somewhat inevitably starting to read more into One Piece Mansion's framing and what sort of ideas are communicated through its mechanics. Which quickly raises a short but crucial question. Is Popo a landlord? I mean, the piling amount of evidence would suggest yes, absolutely. The name One Piece Mansion itself evokes a certain flavor of Japanese apartment living, pointing towards the mid-20th century high-rise buildings, which came to be called mansions, supposedly as a fancy marketing term. Admittedly, I see how someone might inch towards suggesting that the apartments may actually be condominiums, meaning the tenants we see in the game could in fact be homeowners, with Popo as the overworked janitor of their association. But that feels insubstantial. I don't buy it. Even through a cursory glance, we can see how Popo is never implied to work on the behest of anyone else, be it a homeowners association or large corporation. Quite the contrary, the game's whole management phase is solely preoccupied with picking which tenants to house, shuffling them around and collecting monthly rent to finance your continued operations. The evidence is conclusive. As the back of the box bluntly puts it, you are the landlord, the de facto owner of this place, who decides everything that happens to it. End of story. When talking about a game that themes itself around managing an apartment building, this would seem to be a given conclusion. I mean, obviously you're playing as the landlord here. However, One Piece Mansion handles the matter with such disinterest that it almost feels accidental, like some unfortunate circumstance caused by mere happenstance when prioritizing aesthetics over thematics. I fully admit that I cannot know what the designers were thinking when they made One Piece Mansion, because there weren't any interviews, not a single one. As such, all we're left with is the game itself, and its somewhat bare-bones framing. Looking purely at the story cutscenes, One Piece Mansion is a demonstrably clumsy and unnuanced depiction of its subject matter that doesn't really engage with it at all or consider that it could be perceived as remotely controversial. Popo treats housing the way you would treat your Yonggi-yu cards, as abstract symbols to enact fantasy battles over. Implications be damned. I suppose it's a bit like how many games will uncritically put you in the shoes of the police, simply because it's an easy vessel for naturally establishing conflict. Maybe the people at Namco did think long and hard about how Mappy enforces oppression. Who am I to judge? At least they probably thought about it more than the guys who made Battlefield Hardline. But perhaps not enough. So, in the same way Mappy isn't remiss from criticisms of the police, we simply have to acknowledge that Popo is a scumbag by profession. Without getting too long-winded, we don't like landlords. We think it's a scummy, systematic exploitation of human needs, which creates detrimental long-term effects on society. However, this video isn't about arguing that point. Look, I don't care if your mom is a landlady or whatever. If you want to hear actual political theory on why landlords are bad, perhaps a video about the obscure PlayStation title One Piece Mansion isn't the right place to find it. I don't know, maybe the library would be a better place for that. If you somehow stumbled upon this channel and feel genuinely confused about this matter, go out there, radicalize yourself. Anyway, comrades, let's continue. Through the seemingly uncritical usage of its apartment motifs, it seems One Piece Mansion finds itself in a bit of a Pokemon channel situation. That is, where the surface level reading parses as quite cynical and tone deaf, while the mechanics inadvertently speak a completely opposite message. Hey, why didn't you watch our Pokemon channel video, huh? Maybe you should. Simply through the act of being a landlord, our engagement with the game fuels the depiction which is actively painted through our playing. In this way, we can tread beyond the flimsy cutscenes and find further meaning in how One Piece Mansion is structured and what it incentivizes us to do. On the other hand, by this merit, readings can admittedly take on many different shapes depending on our outlook and sympathies. It's not impossible to take the constant stress factor and Tetris-esque unsustainability of the game's central balancing act as being sympathetic towards landlords, presenting their work as hectic and difficult. We don't agree with that interpretation for the record. We just want you to be aware that Death of the Author works both ways. Our take isn't definitive. We are merely persuading you towards our perspective. It deserves reiterating that we don't believe One Piece Mansion puts much stock in its depictions as either positive or negative. Rather, it feels about as unconsciously neutral as any other convenient aesthetic shorthand. The comedy of the loud and annoying neighbours is evidently the biggest focus here, with everything else merely some sort of side effect. For the sake of brevity, let's just leave it at that. In this game, you are apparently a cool teenage landlord, engaging with the concept of housing like a game of checkers. There are rivaling apartment complexes. Evil people install rooms on buildings for the sole purpose of screwing with its inhabitants. This is just a fucked up world, and you are probably playing as one of the villains in their own self-centered worldview. The same way Ash Ketchum would be labeled animal abuser in the real world. One Piece Mansion is goofy and cartoony. Its naivete is amusing in and of itself. I don't get the impression the game takes itself very seriously, and neither should we. However, I still want to go with that Marxist lens a little bit further and take a closer look at the picture painted by the game's mechanics. Mostly because we enjoy writing carefully thought out dissections of video games to make us look smart. But also because whatever tone deafness conveyed by One Piece Mansion's presentation is outdone by the loud clarity of what you actually do in the game. Thank you. So please, humor us as we dig deep and indulge ourselves. Taken holistically as a game about landlordism and the situations which springs out of it, the rules and structure at play will slowly but surely start to color the experience with an inherent cynicism. If you only play One Piece Mansion long enough, this feels like an outcome that will always be reached, that sooner or later it will all lead down this one path. This is because, as you're tasked with balancing rent income and spending, when placing tenants next to other tenants, when playing the game to be won, we are nudged to start prioritizing and making sacrifices. At the core of the game lies a conflict between selfishness and sympathy, me or them. Central in this power dynamic are the overly characteristic tenants. One Piece Mansion presents itself with a light-hearted sense of familiarity, placing goofy archetypes of neighbours in its spotlight while asking if you can identify with it. And of course you can. It's hard not to identify with it. Who doesn't recognize the house party blasting needlessly loud and bassy music at unholy hours? Who can't remember being forced to listen to bickering couples reenacting bad soap operas through paper-thin walls? Who hasn't wondered if the person upstairs is an actual sumo wrestler on clogs playing basketball with boulders? But conversely, we may also have pleasant memories of putting our ears towards the floor trying to identify some banger tune. We may recognize the little nice old lady down the hall making yarn toys for our cat. And surely, those childhood memories of hanging with a neighbor kid causing an absolute ruckus must count for something. One Piece Mansion's comical depiction of apartment living is as simplistic as it is relatable, telling us everything we need to know through nothing more than little animated loops and big, fat arrows. Its visual shorthands are so elegant that with little effort we can borrow it wholesale to quickly illustrate our own current living situation. So here we are, paragon saints, exemplary upstanding citizens, tormented by the party neighbor to the right, the loud, screamy baby neighbor to the left, the horse stable above, and, well, the people downstairs are alright. Woe is us, having to endure these hardships at all times, every day. But on the other hand, I suppose we get our revenge anytime we get real screamy shouty over video games. Checkmate horses. In One Piece Mansion, these characters exist as little more than influences on each other, whether good, bad, or a little bit of both. Yet, at the same time, it's easy to start sympathizing with them. They quickly come to life as human, with their own quirks and needs. The Japanese version even let you connect a phone to the console so you could contact the residents through email. Cute stuff. So when you start playing the game, it's no wonder if suddenly you're filled with the urge to fit these charming misfits together in perfect harmony, like a complex jigsaw puzzle. I suppose this is why some people quickly categorize One Piece Mansion as a puzzle game, because at first glance, it seems to mostly be about fitting pieces together. Although, you will soon find that this puzzle has no convenient or satisfying solution. In truth, it is merely one dimension of the game's mechanics. In practice, you will be a whole lot more concerned about combating the intruding evil forces in your building than anything else. These are cartoonishly bad people who force themselves onto your apartment complex only so they can rob the inhabitants, start fires, and even blow up rooms. They're quite a nuisance to say the least, and they will cause severe damage to your status and progress if you don't swiftly get rid of those bastards. Needless to say, whenever one of these fuckers shows up, all priorities switch over to eradicating them at all costs. And of course, the only way to battle these foes is by pestering them with noisy neighbors until their stress meter is filled. For this purpose, the inhabitants of your building are quickly essentialized and dehumanized as nothing more than application. Attackers and healers with clumsy areas of effect, units to be shuffled around the board haphazardly to fit your needs. Anything to reach your goals. Their presentation as humans dissipates, their cute animations become mere visual identifiers, and their bio blurbs white noise. And when this process has started, nothing can pull the brakes. Once one local delinquent is gone, another will appear to continue their work, and you will promptly reshuffle your tenants again to combat this new threat, continuously working to inflict damage on your enemy, blowing your whistle on their scummy deeds, and ideally healing the wounded from the last encounter, so they can continue fighting another day. It is no longer peaceful apartment living, it is perpetual warfare. I find this intriguing because no matter your attitude going into the game, you will surely end up switching priorities and assume a more distant approach as the intruders keep coming and the chaos ramps up. In the heat of battle, an unspoken conflict slowly but surely emerges. Are you working to protect your tenants or yourself? You might not even be conscious of the question in question, but you will nevertheless arrive at an answer. The inhabitants are external from yourself. You don't fully share their pain or consequences. And in the process of playing, this gap will widen more and more until they're reduced to numbers and directions. All you see is big pointing arrows. All you expect is rent. One Piece Mansion puts you in the role of a landlord and then gives you a set of tasks that cannot feasibly be accomplished without dehumanizing the colorful cast. To succeed, you simply must start seeing them as nothing more than functions fulfilling certain roles. Their happiness and well-being are little more than health meters that can be mitigated once you're out of trouble. If they fold and leave, no biggie. There are more tenants that can fill their place. The rent will still come from somewhere. It is no skin off your back. Eventually, you win or lose, and the apartment complex is discarded like a chessboard is wiped clean. Whatever you had going on in that place, whoever lived there, is irrelevant, as they unceremoniously fade from existence to make way for another building of unassuming residents. You're not encouraged to feel anything. It is simply the transfer from one session to another. Life moves on, because none of this actually matters. This was not a real house, and those were not real people. It was a stack of necessity filled with statistics. Considering all of this, it's hard not to see blatant commentary in One Piece Mansion. As an interactive depiction of landlordism, it's impeccable. Like any good piece of sarcasm, the joyous, colourful facade burst with suppressed bleak cynicism, disguising its long session of dead serious real talk in fun and games. After playing One Piece Mansion, the only sensible conclusion I can come to is to willfully throw its protagonist Popo under the bus, bar him from the pantheon of iconic Capcom heroes, because he is a scumbag, coldly toying with human needs. In any other situation, he would indisputably be the villain the asshat Monkey D. Luffy must punch in the face. And that's exactly why One Piece Mansion's social commentary feels so obviously self-conscious. It's practically deconstructing how other Capcom titles justify their other unlikely heroes with morally questionable career decisions by guarding them with paper-thin rhetorical barriers. Phoenix Wright only defends the innocent. The Resident Evil cops exclusively kill zombies. And Firebrand is one of the good Satans. Maybe Popo is vaguely framed as one of the good landlords in comparison with Chocopape. But do you truthfully believe it after walking a mile in his shoes? I don't think we should feel particularly bad about this character assassination either. I mean, it's just this dude Popo. How many people seriously care about this guy? I think we can afford to vilify him just this once. For the sake of this video, thank you very much. In fact, this is only really looking at story mode Popo, where the goals obfuscate the complete picture. The levels are laid out like little milestone missions for us to endure, instead of sustainable outcomes where peace prevails. The way the game is structured, the story mode can only arbitrarily pull the plug and pat you on the head. Mission complete, bub. When working with One Piece Mansion as your framework, you can't convincingly portray Popo as a good guy without tacking on context and justifications for his actions. He can only succeed if he's spared from continuing the game. As the flip side of the game's coin, the Endless Mode thus bluntly abandons all pretensions and lays bare what One Piece Mansion has been hiding all along. That Popo's ambitions are naive and his endeavors futile. The system you're working to maintain is unsustainable, and sooner or later, everything will crumble. The Endless Mode makes that blatant. The fact that there even is an Endless Mode should tell you enough. Because Endless Modes are, of course, only theoretically endless. They can't go on forever. The entire point is that they don't. That's the spice that keeps them engaging. We simply make an exchange with the game where the boundaries we play by are our own limitations and shortcomings. You play this mode until you give in, until you can't keep it up anymore. And One Piece Mansion does this through nothing else than allowing you to fully engage with its systems, to run its simulation uninterrupted, until the end. In other words, what Endless Mode reveals is that One Piece Mansion is set up so as to always end in failure. The player will squander the balance, the tenant's stress meters will reach critical mass, the rent will not suffice. There is no other outcome. This mansion of cards will always fall apart. Popo perpetually walks the path of destruction towards his own demise, unable to stop the wheels of progress. Because there is no way to tame a fundamentally flawed system. Through its very mechanics, One Piece Mansion seemingly argues that landlords are an unsustainable concept, that they don't see their inhabitants as more than pieces in a board game, assets to be exploited, and that at the end of the day, it's only about their own needs and desires. Every play session begins in tranquil harmony, and through the player's presence, the role they play, the piece dissolves into a chaotic mess. The rent gathered will not be used responsibly, people get shuffled around like cattle, the living conditions make the tenants feel worse by the minute, the neglect spiraling ever further out of control, until we reach boiling point. And no one can defy this fate, because that's simply how the game is designed. Those are the rules. Like a little simulacrum of the state of living in modern times, One Piece Mansion presents a short but concise display of interactive stagnation, where we are made to observe Popo's endless stumbling, destined to always lose, the little landlord stuck in a purgatory of his own making. And if that is not radical as heck, I don't know what is.
Thanks for watching this video about why Popo should go home and be a family man. As usual, you can help us make more videos like this by supporting us on patreon.com/transparens. Doing so will give you access to our Discord, audio companions and behind the scenes material. You will also be featured in this fancy list right here. Acid Shark, All Purpose Nobody, Athayet, Bibbidi Bitch, Colorado Hugge, Dave Pickett, Dr. Puntgusher Esquire, Eden Senta, Fran Rogers, Intonion, Joy Content, Klaus Morals, Luna, Matthias Graman, Miamik64, Mr. Tellius, Mosling, Neighbour, Nishvat, Paperlanti, Raider of the Stars, Sarah Bloomer, Saxon, Scrutinize, Yami Shaggy, One Splee 16, Abigail Nail, Ada Avery, Ali, Anna Day, Anonymous, Aria Soria, Arai, Aurora 42, Autumn Muse, Bad Wolfos, BK Flash, Blues Piranha, Botch Frivarg, Charles Goldhaber, Chloe, Comfy Feline, LED Mox, Elliot Diebold, Emmy Murphy, Ephemeral Mist, Eric Hamilton Schneider, Flufquist, Friend of Dracula, Fjorn, Bungle, Henrik, Hope, Indigo Trance, Infernal Ramblings, Ingrid, Yei Are Not, Yeon Jong, Yay Mission, Jelly God, Jennifer, Kadath, El Tantivi, Marika, Maddie Madkip, Madeline Machado, Mar B, Mark Mahan, Michael Lee, Miles Seawind, Minched Fish, Mitch Haley, Mr. Movie, Neuropain, Nerbion, Passion Tentacle, Quasar Nebula, Robin, Sally Luna, Shonal McDoodle, Shogun, Sean Wolfbark, Silkmoth, Silly Rookie, Skyhoppers, Sleepy, Sleepy Slug, Soyborn, Surashu, Talia Parkinson, TB Skyen, That Queer Birdman, Tiny Sam, VG, and Wooftree. Also welcoming Cryptid Joe, Literate Goblin, Mr. Ben T. Hughpuff, and Cephonius. That's it. That's all we have for you today. There's nothing else. I'm sorry. Bye. The One Piece! The One Piece is real!